Hey everyone, welcome back to the next episode of the Culture Eats Everything podcast. I've got Dr. Jim Van Allen. He's got a PhD in educational leadership and he's the CEO of the Energy Bus for Schools, all about creating positive cultures in schools. But he's got a lot of lessons for all of us, I think, around just leadership in general and how do we bring more energy and more engagement to our cultures. So, welcome to the show, Jim.
Thank you, Tom. It's great to be here to talk all about culture and energy and positivity in schools and with your CEOs that are also listening as well. There's so much crossover between what makes a school and a district successful, and of course, what makes businesses and organizations and other areas successful too. So excited to jump in.
Yeah, me too. It's some of my favorite subjects, especially when I get to talk about kids. Because what's better than kids? So let's start there. Actually, you said you had a story for us about the positive impact of the work.
What we do is we help to give schools and districts a blueprint to have a positive school culture, and we bring to life the concepts of the book The Energy Bus by John Gordon, which has gone on to sell 4 million copies worldwide. And we have a school program based on that book because so many schools want to be positive places. And the Energy Bus book is about how to become more positive. So with the Energy Bus for Schools, we had a school once inside of our program, and they're out in California. Great, great school. And they were a successful energy, we call them an energy bus school. They're in the program, they're dedicated to positivity. That's their big mission. And their leadership team is a really strong group, headed by a principal that was truly engaged in the mission of becoming a positive place. And I think if you're going to be a CEO or superintendent or principal, anybody in a leadership role, I think that has to be your main focus, right? Or one of your main focuses is having a positive culture, because why on earth would I want to work somewhere that's not, especially if you're talking about a teacher? So you had this really strong leadership group, assistant principal, counselors, principal, and they had a student coming into their school, transferring in, and automatically, this student probably should have been labeled as a problem child, a problem student. We all know who these kids are sometimes, okay? You can work really hard, really, really hard to get them engaged and get them going and work on their attitude, but sometimes they don't quite come around. And this student kind of had that label attached to them from the school they were transferring in from. And the school could have easily just gone through with that and said, okay, this is the problem kid. We're going to have to put him in these remedial classes. We're going to have to really, hype the discipline on him. We're going to have to really like keep our thumb on him and like kind of hold him down type. But the leadership team kind of took a different approach. As an energy bus school, they know that they are supposed to be looking at the best of people. They need to be looking for solutions. Right? We message that constantly inside the program. So they empowered the student. They met with him, they talked to him, they tried to figure out what was going on. Like let's actually get to the root causes here of perhaps why you're acting out instead of just dealing with the symptoms, right? The actions. Let's actually go to the core. And they figured out that his cousins attended the school and he was very, very protective and very, very loyal, like to his friends and his cousins and things that he believed in. And they said, okay, let's work with that. So they put him in leadership positions. Like they said, we want you to be in student government. This is at elementary school, so we're talking fourth, fifth grade. We're not talking about, high level government things here, but enough for a fourth or fifth grader. And they put him in a mentoring role with kindergartners, right? Because they knew he was really loyal. They knew he was really strong personality. And they put him in those positions where he was able to really find success and succeed and break out of that label. And I love when students can break out of labels. And this particular school really did a great job of wanting to know this student, wanting to understand how they could turn him around, make him better, put him in positions to succeed when other schools may have just said, no, you're going to be the detention kid, and that's all we're going to think of you as. They were able to break out of that cycle with him. And now he's gone on and inspired other students to, quote, get on the bus, right, and be more positive. And that's a testament to the leadership of that school to say, we want to think and do things a little bit different. And I know that's what I'm attracted to as a person, as somebody who works with superintendents and school leaders. I want you to be a change maker. I want you to think differently. I want you to not color inside the lines, like, when it comes to the school culture, because that's what it's going to take to really uplift our schools and make teachers want to stay and make students want to engage in the culture there. So I love that story. That one of my great schools inside of our Energy Bus program.
Yeah, and it's amazing what kids will rise to when the adults have that same level, right? And they raise the bar for the kids to reach to. The kids always tend to meet that bar. It reminds me of one of the schools when I was a school superintendent in Detroit. One of my principals took the four most difficult kids. This was middle school, and actually made them the sort of the chairs of the positive culture
Yeah.
movement at the school and put their names on the board in the hallway right outside the office. And within a few weeks they completely had transformed how they were showing up at school. Still challenges, obviously, it doesn't make everything perfect, but just believing in them and sort of changing the narrative they had about themselves within the school completely changed the dynamic. And probably that was 15 years ago. So I can only imagine what good has come of that. Just that simple idea of believing the best in kids. And it's actually a great leadership lesson, I think, for us as leaders, as school superintendents or CEOs, that we do the same thing to our fellow adults too, don't we? We tend to label them and sort of place a fixed mindset on each other as adults. So maybe talk a little bit about that. How does the energy bus system help the adults within a school building as well?
Well, from an adult standpoint, what I've realized, like working with schools and staff and students, is that sometimes the adults are not as different from the students that we're trying to change their lives too. The adults can be cliquey sometimes. The adults can be negative. The adults sometimes can be, the loudest in the school, and not wanting to help things a little bit. So, but at the same time, always go back to the core. You always have to go back to the root, right? And if you want to have some real change. So when it comes to the adults and the ones who maybe don't quite get it at first, there's a reason why. And a lot of times, the ones who are not quite on board with culture building or the vision of a leader, a leader sets the vision. Obviously, culture beats strategy. You gotta have that culture, but you have to have that leader that sets it and puts the right people in place. But there's always, anytime I talk to a superintendent or a principal, they're always concerned with the three or four out of the 90, right, that are not quite on the bus, that are just sort of hanging on to the bus or at the bus stop, whatever pun you want to call it. And normally they've been burned, right? Those teachers are not willing to trust as much because maybe they've had three principals in 5 years, right?
Mm.
Maybe they've had a superintendent that hasn't stuck around. Maybe they've never had a leader that truly cares for them, knows them relationally, is willing to fight for them, is willing to build a relationship with them. Maybe they've never had that. And so if you're a teacher, you're an adult in a school, or like I said, in a business too, right? Why are you, we can't expect people to just automatically go with the plan that's being presented because they're like, how do I know you're going to be there in a year or two to see this through? You haven't really articulated how I and my role can provide value to this culture or to your vision, to your plan. I think people need to be invited into the process, right? Adults like students like need to be engaged in the process. And you can't always, as a leader, wherever you are, you can't always have employees have that seat at the table to let you know everything about their mind of what's going to happen in that school or that business. But sometimes you have to make that executive decision. But I do believe there are positive times where you can have people give their input on the direction of the school or the business and what needs to happen, what needs to be done, because people want to be engaged with. And then you're going to have, for example, the teacher, if I'm a superintendent or a leader and I really get to know you and engage with you and want you to be part of this culture and seek your input and put you in leadership positions, then I'm going to be more willing to engage and stay. But the key here is relationships. I always say the number one job of a leader, right, is to engage relationships, to have great relationships with people, to cultivate those relationships. That's what will drive engagement. That's what will drive low attrition, people leaving the business or leaving the school. And you'll walk that fine line between love and accountability. And we can talk more about that, but that's the love and accountability spectrum is right where a leader needs to be. That needs to be first and foremost center in their worlds.
Well, let's keep going with that because I think that is intriguing. So talk a little bit more about what that language means to you, love and accountability.
I talk about this a lot with our leaders, our school leaders, and when I've gone into I've spoken to before I was the school guy, right? I was in and out of a lot of businesses and banks and I've been into a seed company. I've been to many different pharmaceutical, like I've done professional development with a lot of different groups now in my 15, 16 years as a speaker. And what I've found is when it comes to leadership, you think of a spectrum, love on one side, accountability on the other side. And there's some leaders that are way too much on that love side, right? They want to Michael Scott this thing, if I can steal a line from The Office, right? They want to be everybody's friend. They want to be liked. They just want it to be fun and people to a very likability thing going on there. They want to just love, 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 love. And listen, like all the power to you. I get it. But when you do that, a lot of times you lose the ability to hold people accountable to the mission and vision and the job duties and the expectations of the company, of the school. Versus the other side, if you're too accountable, too much on accountability, numbers, data, drive, you're not really loving people, right? You're too focused on the relationship. You're too focused on the fruit and not the root. You're too focused on the bottom line and driving constantly that you're not actually recognizing, appreciating, encouraging people, which is the love side. And people can be turned off by both sides. Like I've met leaders that are very much on the love side. There are school leaders that have gone down the hall with the music blasting, handing out treats, feeding their staff in their mind, thinking they're doing everything right. But then I go to do PD with the staff. The principal's not there. This is a true story. And the staff can't stand the principal, right? Because they claim they have an open door. They claim that, we're all love here and I have this music blasting, but they never took the time to actually get to know the faculty. They kind of kept them at an arm's length, right? That's that too much love piece. But I've had the accountability piece too, where somebody's just, when you listen, if I know anything about teachers, like they want to be left alone a little bit, right? And Tom, you know this, like they don't want to have people have their thumb on them all the time. I always say you got to let artists, create, you got to let creative people create. Teachers are like that. And they need to be given some autonomy sometimes, but then also on the bus, but having a little bit of autonomy at times. So when you're driving too much, when it's all data, when you're not taking the time to get to know them, because think about from a school standpoint, think about teachers, like they're very relational driven. That's why they got into teaching, because they love students. They love working with them. They love seeing those aha moments. They love talking to them and having those great relationships with them. So as a leader, superintendent, school leader, you have to also be relationally oriented to speak the love language of your teachers. So that's that love and accountability structure spectrum. And for any leader listening, no matter where you are, you want to find yourself, what's the obvious answer, right? Right in the middle. Where's the balance? Where's the balance? And too much on one side, too much on the other, just like in society, right? We rock one way, we rock the other way, and that can cause a lot of division and cracks in the foundation. But when you're right in the middle, you can go between both worlds and people will know you love them, but they'll also know that you're going to hold them accountable. And I think that's the same thing as a parent, right? I want my kids to know that I love them and we have great relationships, but also I'm not their friend, right? We're going to hold them accountable. There's expectations and you kind of stay in that middle spot, that middle 40 between, I said the 40, 50, 40, right? In the football line. You want to be right in that middle spot there. And that's ultimately how you want to drive culture inside schools and businesses. The love and accountability spectrum is huge.
Yeah. I like it. It's interesting to think about. I never thought about the spectrum there of either or sort of thinking, because I think we do get into that a lot in our society. It's like binary. It's like either this or that, but really it's both. How do we hold up two opposing ideas at the same time and be able to function as leaders is a lot of our job, frankly, is to manage those paradoxes. So share a little bit more about the energy bus and like give us maybe one or two of the core tenets that if I'm a leader out there, like give me something practical I can take out of today's conversation.
Well, so from a practicality standpoint, if you're a leader and you're listening to this and you're hearing about the energy bus, I need you to know that you can't accomplish your goals unless you have people that are willing to come along with you, accent them, help you, and you need to be able to delegate back to them as well. So the energy bus, schools and companies and people like, why is it sold 4.5 million copies worldwide? Is because it carries this message of unity. How do we build unity inside schools, businesses, families? Like it tracks a main character. It's a fable who goes through trials and tribulations on how to be more positive and save his job and his family and his livelihood, his mental health too, using 10 principles. So that's why so many schools and businesses have gravitated towards the concept of this book. And because it's all about how do we defeat negativity, become more positive, and be more unified, the concept of the bus. So from a practical standpoint, if I'm a leader, I'm hiring the best people around me. I'm 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 making sure I have the best team around me. I'm pouring into that team. I'm starting there. And I'm also going to be over communicating with that team and with my employees and with my teachers. Because if you under communicate, what happens is where there's a void in communication, negativity fills it. The worst thing you can have happen as a leader is people to fill in the gaps for you, people to add their own perception for you. So I tell my from a school standpoint, I say, listen, you need to be accessing every method of communication possible. Newsletter, school marquee, social media, text blast, phone calls, like you need newsletter, like you need to be hitting every channel so people know what's going on in that school. Not just, hey, the 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 spaghetti dinner is next Friday, but more about here's what's going on culturally. Here's our wins. Here's our staff member spotlight. Here's our student spotlight. Here's a fun activity we did. Those types of wins, people want to feel engaged to the school, and that's how you over communicate. I always say too, when it comes to meetings, you know, meetings are the Achilles heel of a lot of schools and companies too. People, I think from a school standpoint, people kind of tune out the meeting because they're like, why couldn't this just be an email? So I say, listen, when it comes to meetings, you want something practical, like you meet only when it's something general enough for everybody. And you don't just start the meeting and say, hey, all right, welcome, let's get into their agenda. Ease into it. Like, let's start out with some wins. Who has some wins we want to celebrate today? What's something great that happened today? Share me a success of the day. What's your rose of the day? Something you want to call it. And let that go for 5, 6, 7, 8 minutes because that's what will elicit some great positive feelings in the room and get people to reorient their thinking back to the positive. Like, I want every leader listening to try to find the best in people, try to find the best in situations, try to think of the positive things first. Doesn't mean you ignore the negative, certainly, but where our mind goes, right? Where our focus is, that's where our mind goes. Where our focus is, that's where our mind goes. So ease into those meetings and then the save the relational part for small group meetings. One trick I like to give to schools, and this is good for your leaders, any leader that's listening to this, to be honest with you, kind of like coffee dates. So you can, if you have 100 people working for you, why not have it so you're meeting with 4, 5 of them, you know, throughout the next 3, 4 months here. If you did that 3 times a week, you're going to get to everybody. And it's just you meeting with them, open agenda. Tell me your thoughts, penny for your thoughts. What's going on here? Like, talk to me about culture, talk to me about challenges, talk to me about wins, just open forum. If Every leader did that, right? Now, understandable if you have 15,000 people at your company, not exactly, not as practical, but there's still ways of meeting on Zoom with small groups as necessary. But I had a school principal, a school president do that once, and they were new to the school and they met with small groups all around the campus, and they made some of them random, others they wanted a nice representation of people. And she got so much information out of those small group meetings than she would have ever gotten if she brought everybody into the room at once. Because when you bring everybody into the room at once, you're going to get a few that talk, right? You're going to get the introverts who are sitting in the back not talking, versus you put them in a small group and you access both the introvert and the extrovert. Because the extroverts are always going to talk. But the introverts, though, will talk in a small group because if you call on them, if you ask them their thinking, they will share, but they need to be engaged with. That's a good trick, right? You got to introverts and extroverts. The introverts are not, it's not that they're antisocial. They just need to be engaged and brought into the conversation. And small group meetings help you to do that. So small group meetings are where you grow. Big meetings, right, where you flow, right? That's just the broadcast, big information here. And I talked about the over communication piece as well when it comes to your staff. And that's really what the Energy Bus teaches, is about how to be more positive, how to be more engaged, how to be more unified. And the communication is a huge part of that.
Yeah. So it's probably the number one word we've heard in the last 30 years of doing this work is communication is a problem around here. And it certainly resonates, I think, in for-profits, nonprofit schools. It's just
Right.
part of being in the human business. We're almost out of time, so there's a lot more to talk about. So I'm curious though. You said earlier defeating negativity, which doesn't seem possible to me, but maybe you've got a magic sauce or a magic pixie dust for us. So how do you guys think about defeating negativity?
As far as how to do it or the importance of it, or
How do you do it? Yeah.
well, first of all, you need to bring. So there's a term in the energy bus, and it's called the an energy vampire, right? And we all know who these people are, and we need to bring the energy vampires into the light. So you have to have a leader who's not afraid to have difficult conversations. And my mentor and the gentleman I work for, John Gordon, who's had 31 books out now. I've been fortunate to write two of them with him. But he wrote a book called Difficult Conversations Don't Have to Be Difficult. And that's the God's honest truth. I do an activity with my groups a lot where I'll stand in the middle and I'll have a giant poster board that says conflict on it, right? And I say, pretend I am the personification of conflict. I am that difficult conversation you need to have with a staff member or somebody. Sometimes not an argument, but just that, hey, that we need to talk, right? Pretend I'm that conversation. I said, now move around the room closer or farther away from me, depending on your level of comfort with engaging in this conflict, this confrontation, right? This conversation. And you would be amazed at where people go. There's some people who will breathe down my neck. There's some people that will go up into the gym stairs. There's some people who will go leave the room, and in the middle, it's a nice little spider web of people. And I always try to find the school leader and see where they are. And they're usually close to me, but not like down my neck. They're usually kind of like 20% away from me, right? And I love that activity because I engage with people and I say, listen, those of you who are close to me, it's not that the misconception is you're a bully and you go looking for a fight. And they're like, no, that's not who we are. We just know that to defeat negativity, you have to deal with it right away. Right. And the people that are usually far away in that room are like, we just want to let others deal with it. We want people to like us. We don't want to get involved. Right. We want everything to be sunshine and rainbows. And they've said that. But the reality is, and everybody listening to this knows, whether you've been in a family, a business, a school, if you let things go, they get worse. Because what happens is, what did I say, right? Where there's a void in communication, negativity fills it. So whatever issue that could have been dealt with right away, you let it build, it's only going to get worse because both sides are adding their own layer of whatever you want to call it to it, perception to it. you know, exaggeration to the events that actually are happening. So dealing with negativity and challenges right away is essential, and not letting them go. But here's the other side of that. Um, I think one of the ways you deal with negativity too and defeat it is you don't fight every battle, right? Because if you're a leader and you're fighting every single battle, every little employee goes off track for a second, or this happens, like, as long as it's not detrimental to the company, or, things happen, people make mistakes, okay? We don't need to fly off the handle at every mistake. I like to look for patterns first before I truly have that. Okay, we got it. Let's talk here. Let's see what's going on. Let's put a plan in place to help you or help us here. I don't believe people should be fighting every single battle. At the same time, if you don't fight at all, if you don't have that conversation at all, we need to be changing the perception of the word conflict and confrontation and difficult conversations. We need to be changing that perception, because people hear it and they shy away, right? It's uncomfortable. It is. It gives people anxiety to think and talk about that. But I teach my leaders with the energy bus to, number one, if you have great relationships with people, if you've been following the love and accountability spectrum like we just talked about, then when you need to actually have that conversation with somebody, all you got to do is lean towards the accountability side a little bit. You're already kind of there, right? You just got to lean into it a little bit more. And that's the problem. That's why I keep going back to communication. If the only time you are talking, having that difficult conversation, if the only time you're communicating with your employees is when you're giving them feedback or telling them something they did wrong or action plan, then that's all they're going to think of you as, right? That's the accountability side. But if you have this ongoing relationship with them somehow, okay, when you do need to have that conversation, you're already down that river, okay? And it's okay. And they know it's coming from a place of love. And the employee will know that. The teacher will know that. And of course, your tact matters, okay? And people this day and age are a little more sensitive than they were in the 80s or in the 90s, right? So you have to, keep an eye on tact, but at the same time, if it's coming from a place of love, you're going to defeat that negativity. They're going to come back on the bus, and you have a stronger ride because of it.
Yeah, yeah, I think you're speaking to the nature of leadership, which is it never really goes away. It keeps cropping back up, and you've got to defeat it over and over and over again. You got to tackle the issues as they come up. I like that idea of an energy vampire. You got to make sure to especially don't let those folks lead your culture. You've got to be the leader, and if you've got some energy vampires, you got to go address that with love, but with directness also. Well, this has been great, Jim. Thanks so much for joining us on the podcast today. And for folks that are interested in learning more about the Energy Bus, where should they go?
It's great to be here. I appreciate the conversation. Anybody can go to Energy Bus for Schools, FOR schools, plural.com. And you can find me on social media at Jim Van Allan. That's VANALLAN.
Awesome. All right. Thanks again, Jim. Have a great rest of your week.
Thank you. All the best to you and your listeners. Thank you.